The Duchess of Sussex apologised at a hearing last month for misleading the court about whether information had been given to the authors of Finding Freedom. The Court of Appeal heard how Meghan had asked her then Communications Secretary Jason Knauf to share details with Omid Scobie and Caroline Durand despite having earlier insisted she did not contribute. The publisher of the Mail on Sunday Today lost its appeal against a ruling in favour of the Duchess over the publication of a personal letter to her estranged father Thomas Markle. In his ruling, Sir Geoffrey Vaux addressed Meghan's apology to the court in November. He said, "This was, at best, an unfortunate lapse of memory on her part." Meghan sued Associated Newspapers Limited, ANL, also the publisher of Mail Online, over 5 articles that reproduced parts of a personal and private letter to Mr. Markle in August 2018. The Duchess won her case earlier this year when a High Court judge ruled in her favour without a full trial. ANL brought an appeal against that decision and, at a 3-day hearing in November, argued the case should go to a trial on Meghan's claims against the publisher including breach of privacy and copyright. But in a ruling on Thursday, Sir Geoffrey, Dame Victoria Sharp and Lord Justice Bean dismissed the publisher's appeal. Reading a summary of their decision, Sir Geoffrey said, "It was hard to see what evidence could have been adduced at trial that would have altered the situation. The judge had been in as good a position as any trial judge to look at the article in People magazine, the letter and the Mail on Sunday articles to decide if publication of the contents of the letter was appropriate to rebut the allegations against Mr. Markle. The judge had correctly decided that, whilst it might have been proportionate to publish a very small part of the letter for that purpose, it was not necessary to publish half the contents of the letter as ANL had done." In a statement after the ruling, Meghan said, "This is a victory not just for me, but for anyone who has ever felt scared to stand up for what's right. While this win is precedent-setting, what matters most is that we are now collectively brave enough to reshape a tabloid industry that conditions people to be cruel and profits from the lies and pain that they create. From day one, I have treated this lawsuit as an important measure of right versus wrong. The defendant has treated it as a game with no rules. The longer they dragged it out, the more they could twist facts and manipulate the public, even during the appeal itself, making a straightforward case extraordinarily convoluted in order to generate more headlines and sell more newspapers, a model that rewards chaos above truth. In the nearly 3 years since this began, I have been patient in the face of deception, intimidation and calculated attacks. Today, the courts ruled in my favour again, cementing that the Mail on Sunday, owned by Lord Jonathan Rothermere, has broken the law." In a witness statement, Mr. Knauf said the book was discussed on a routine basis, which was discussed directly with the Duchess multiple times in person and over email. Mr. Knauf also discussed planning a meeting with the authors to provide background information and said Meghan had given him several briefing points to share with them. In her witness statement, the Duchess apologised for misleading the court about whether Mr. Knauf provided information to Mr. Scobie or Ms. Durand. She said, "I accept that Mr. Knauf did provide some information to the authors for the book and that he did so with my knowledge, for a meeting that he planned for with the authors in his capacity as Communications Secretary. The extent of the information he shared is unknown to me. When I approved the passage, I did not have the benefit of seeing these emails and I apologize to the court for the fact that I had not remembered these exchanges at the time. I had absolutely no wish or intention to mislead the defendant or the court." Prince Harry lent his voice to co-narrate a video by the People's Vaccine, released to mark World AIDS Day. The clip draws striking parallels between the struggles for access to HIV medicines and COVID-19 vaccines in developing countries. With this video, the People's Vaccine, a movement of health and humanitarian organizations, experts, economists and global leaders, argues the world is witnessing history repeating itself when it comes to barring poorer countries to access to means that could drastically curb a pandemic. The video is narrated by both the Duke of Sussex and UN AIDS Executive Director Winnie Byanyima. It begins with Ms. Byanyima saying, "The world is fighting a killer virus and not for the first time. It then shows footage from the late 1980s and 1990s regarding the worldwide HIV and AIDS crisis. Late Princess Diana appears in the footage while her younger son, Prince Harry, begins to speak. In the clip, Harry can be heard saying, "There are striking parallels between COVID-19 and another deadly pandemic, one that emerged 40 years ago, HIV." The video goes on noting both these pandemics have caused millions of deaths, but scientific breakthroughs such as antiretroviral treatments for HIV and the COVID vaccines have been able to bring life back to normal for many but not for all, as the Duke can be heard saying. He adds, "This is a story about how corporate greed and political failure have prolonged both pandemic and what we can do to stop it." While many rich countries are already distributing to their population booster jabs, only 6% of the people living in the continent of Africa have been fully vaccinated against COVID. This inequality in the distribution of vaccines comes as the United Nations warned AIDS will kill 7.7 million people in the next decade if access to treatments isn't not made fairer. Ms. Byanyima can be heard saying in the video, "Why are the poor being left behind?" Among organizations endorsing the message of the video, there is Frontline AIDS, whose executive director Christine Stegling said, "This is not the first time the governments of rich countries have moved on from a problem as soon as it appears to be in someone else's backyard. We saw it with AIDS, where the transformative impact of HIV treatments in rich countries has seen urgency, focus and funding for the global response fall sharply, and we are starting to see the same thing with COVID-19. We cannot allow history to repeat itself. The COVID-19 pandemic is far from over, but high-income, high-vaccination countries are already starting to talk about future pandemics, while turning a blind eye to those that continue to impact poorer regions. This will only prolong the pain of existing pandemics, placing millions of lives at risk. We urgently need a people TMS vaccine to benefit everyone, everywhere." Prince Harry has been championing the cause of vaccine equity for months alongside his wife, Meghan Markle. In May, the couple were campaign chairs of Global Citizens Vax Live, drawing attention on the importance to distribute COVID vaccine across the world to end the pandemic. They have since continued to keep the spotlight on this issue with other public appearances, including a series of visits during their tour of New York in September. But the Duke has also spent years working to improve the lives of people affected by HIV and AIDS. In the mid-2000s, he co-founded Centibale to support the mental and physical well-being of children in Lesotho affected by HIV. With the passing of the years, the charity has opened a branch also in Botswana. The Duke of Sussex followed in his mother's footsteps in not only supporting people affected by HIV, but also breaking the stigma attached to people living with this disease. The late Princess of Wales famously shook hands without wearing gloves and hugged HIV patients during her official visits. At the height of the AIDS epidemic in 1987, Diana opened the UK's first specialist HIV/AIDS unit at London TMS Middlesex Hospital, where she said, "HIV does not make people dangerous to know. You can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. What's more, you can share their homes, their workplaces, and their playgrounds and toys." Prince Harry has regularly marked World AIDS Day. Just last year, he said, "On this World AIDS Day, I want to restate my personal commitment to doing all I can to keep chipping away at the stigma, and to be able to say we are the generation that finally ends HIV." Speaking of the Duchess, he added, "I think she's been very disrespectful to the Queen, who's such a great woman, such a great person, a historic person. I think she's very disrespectful to the royal family, and most importantly to the Queen." Speaking about Meghan's campaigning on paid parental leave using her royal title, Mr. Trump also said, "She is trying to do things that I think are very inappropriate.